My name is Chelsea Acton. I'm 33 years old, and I run a horse rescue farm in rural Virginia. I spend most of my day reading about animals. How a mare curls her ears when she's been hit. How a foal gets up from an outstretched hand. After 8 years on the job, I've become quite adept at diagnosing equine injuries. But I've completely lost my bearings when it comes to dealing with people, especially my family. What my brother-in-law did at our family reunion last June, and what happened 69 days later at my mother's birthday party, taught me that the most dangerous predators aren't the ones who bite, but the ones who smile at your table and mention your family. Welcome back to Quiet Drama Stories. This channel shares touching family stories about betrayal, boundaries, and the quiet strength needed to protect what we've built. If you enjoyed this story, leave a comment below and don't forget to subscribe. I wasn't raised dreaming about horses. I grew up in a small town in the Shannon Valley, the daughter of a canteen worker and a mechanic. My first career was in accounting. For 3 years after graduating, I worked as an accountant at a small company in Stanton, where I reconciled accounts and filed quarterly tax returns for local businesses. A good, stable job. But every Saturday, I drove to my neighbor's farm to help her look after her horses. Every Monday morning, I sat at my desk thinking about fences instead of spreadsheets. At 25, I found a 12-acre lot with a barn that had more holes than roof. It was so cheap that my savings of 3 years, plus a small loan from the Small Business Administration, covered the down payment. I signed the papers on Tuesday, and that same afternoon I started removing the rotting boards from the barn walls. That first winter, I had 5 horses I'd rescued, animals the county had impounded for neglect, and a heater I'd placed between the stables because they lacked insulation. I learned to fix fences from YouTube. I learned to feed horses from a retired veterinarian who lived near 11th Street. I learned that if you persevere with the hard work no one wants to do at 5 a.m. every day, that hard work eventually becomes real work. 8 years later, the Acton Ridge Rescue Center had grown to 22 horses. I ran a farm shop in the front building, selling leather goods, honey, and homemade jams. I established an equine therapy program for veterans with PTSD. 4 sessions a week, free of charge. Every night, I would sit at my desk and count the number of sessions that day. Food costs, lodging fees, vet bills, even the smell. This habit would save my farm. I didn't know it then. My sister Paige is 4 years younger than me. During our childhood, we were like sisters when no one else was around. Same room, same bus stop, same hand-knitted winter coat. Paige was the social one, the pretty one, the one who knew everyone's name at church. I was the one who balanced my mom's checking account when my dad was sick. We loved each other. But sometime between her college enrollment and my first tax season, the gap started to widen. Paige married Garrett Hollis when she was 24. She'd known him for 7 months. My mom never refused her anything. My mom never refused Paige anything. But I saw her at the kitchen sink on our wedding night, washing the same pot for 10 straight minutes. Paige had 2 children soon after. Lily was born at 25 and Mason at 27. She stayed home while Garrett worked in insurance. Every time I visited, the conversations grew shorter and the voices grew louder. Being self-employed is undoubtedly wonderful. I wished I could ride horses all day. I told myself she was joking. I told myself she was tired of children. Then it was my mother. Linda Acton, 58, had retired from her job at the school cafeteria after 31 years. She had been widowed 6 years earlier when her father's heart stopped in the garage one Sunday morning. My mother lived alone in the house where she had raised us, 20 minutes from my farm. She longed for one thing more than anything else for her family, to gather under one roof and spend the day happily. "You are all I have," she would say at least once a month. Because I was the eldest, because I had enough space, and because I felt like I was hurting a kitten when I refused my mother's request, I offered them everything. Every birthday, every holiday, every date, on my farm, at my own expense. Garrett Hollis was the type of person who could talk for 20 minutes without saying anything of value. He had a firm handshake and a broad smile, and he habitually steered every conversation toward money, specifically other people's money. On his first visit to Acton Ridge, he wandered around the property as if he were a buyer. "How much is this place worth?" "$500,000. A pretty good sum for a girl who counts other people's taxes. I didn't correct her insulting remark. I poured her iced tea and showed her the barn. This was my pattern of mistakes. No confrontation, no correction, just absorption. 18 months before the reunion, Garrett called me one Wednesday evening. I needed $3,000 to fix my car. The transmission in his Tahoe was faulty, and the mechanic wouldn't let me fix it for free. I sent the car via Zelle that same hour. He said he'd reimburse me in 2 weeks. 18 months later, I'm still waiting. I've only mentioned it once, at my mother's house over dinner on a Sunday. Garrett laughed and flicked his fork. Come on, Chelsea. We're family, Mom nodded. Paige looked down at her plate. I let it go because $3,000 wasn't worth losing my sister. That's the kind of calculation you make when you love someone. You weigh the money against the relationship and you let it go. The problem is, people like Garrett never stop doing that calculation in their favor. There was something else I needed to pay more attention to. During a visit to the farm shop, Garrett asked me, "Do you use QuickBooks or something?" I replied that I used my bank's business app on the shop's tablet. I was just talking to him, and I thought he just wanted to chat. My mother called me in early May with the idea of a family reunion. A real family reunion, Chelsea. It wasn't just the 4 of us and the children. It included Aunt Harriet, Uncle Tom, your cousins, Karen and Dean, and anyone else who was still healthy enough to enjoy themselves. She wanted the party at the farm, and of course she wanted it. I agreed, because I always do. I spent 3 weeks getting ready. I rented extra tables and chairs, hired a local barbecue company to cater, hung lights over the barn entrance, arranged pony rides for the children with my friendly manager, Biscuit, and opened the farm shop, so the family could browse and shop. Things just kept getting worse. I paid $4,000 of my own money, and I didn't tell anyone because mentioning it would have made my mother feel guilty and Paige ashamed. Saturday, June 15th. 30 people showed up under a clear Virginia sky. Hot hamburgers. Children running after each other through the pasture gate. Aunt Harriet hugged me so tightly my ribs almost broke. It was a day that made me realize the value of family. I was busy using my tablet, the same iPad I use for work, at the farm shop, ordering jars of honey, and leather keychains for cousins I hadn't seen in years. At exactly 200, one of my dorm roommates, startled by a child's balloon, kicked the bathroom door. Miguel, the stablemaster, called me on the radio. I put the tablet on the counter and said to Garrett, who was standing there with a beer in his hand, "Hey, can you keep an eye on the cash register for a few minutes? I've got a problem with the horses." He smiled and said, "Sure, Chelsea, go get your animals." It was the first time Garrett had ever volunteered for anything. I was in the barn for about 8 minutes. The Duchess, the mayor, had damaged the barn door with her falcon. Nothing serious. Cool socks, blankets ready. When I got back to the farm shop, Garrett was behind the counter scrolling through his tablet. He looked up quickly and said he was checking the card reader was syncing. The card reader sat on the counter, unplugged. I glanced at the tablet screen. The bank app was minimized, but still running in the background. I'd logged in earlier to process a payment from the merchant during the morning setup, and hadn't logged out in a hurry. I picked up the tablet, closed the app, and locked the screen. 8 minutes. That was all he needed. But I didn't feel threatened yet. It was a family reunion. My sister's husband, the man who carried my niece to her christening. You don't perceive a threat in such circumstances. Your mind categorizes him as a stranger and moves on. Later that evening, while everyone was eating cake, Paige pulled me aside by the pasture fence. "Chelsea, how much does it cost to run this place a month?" "Really?" I gave her a rough estimate: food, vet, insurance, Miguel's salary, utility bills, about $7,000 or $8,000. She nodded slowly and said, "That's a lot." I saw her say it, not sympathetically, but with precise calculations, as if she were measuring something. Aunt Harriet interrupted us for a family photo. Paige smiled for the camera. In the picture we're standing side by side, our arms around each other. "Sister, I keep this photo on my fridge. It reminds me that those closest to you are the ones who can truly support you." Everyone left by 7. I cleaned up by myself, as usual. I was sweeping the barn driveway, arranging the rented chairs, and hauling trash bags into the bin. At 9:30, I was at my desk doing what I do every night, checking the day's accounts. I opened the bank app on my laptop and saw my checking account balance of $3,847. I looked at the screen. On Friday, the day before the balance had been $58.47. That day, 3 money transfers were made at $18,000 at 2:00 p.m. to $15,000 at 20:22 p.m. and $14,000 at 20:31 p.m., totaling $47,000. The transfers arrived within 17 minutes. The recipient's initials were GH. I checked them 3 times, then 4, then 5 after that. I picked up the phone and called the bank's off-hours customer service line. The automated system confirmed the transfers. An employee told me that since the transactions were made from a device registered to my account, they couldn't cancel them without a formal objection. Submitting the objection Saturday night meant I had to wait until Monday. I changed all my passwords, enabled additional security layers, and followed all the correct procedures, but it was no use because the money had already been withdrawn. That night, I sat in the stable on an overturned bucket between Juniper, the first horse I'd ever saved, a one-eyed thoroughbred abandoned in a field, and the feed room door, a $3,847, that would feed 22 horses for 3 weeks, maybe 4 if I extended it. After that, I'd have to start sorting through the animals I was going to send. I pressed my forehead against Juniper's neck and took a deep breath. Sunday morning. I was sitting on my porch sipping a coffee I wasn't enjoying, so I called Garrett. He answered after the 3rd ring. Hi? Hey Chelsea, last night's party was great. Lily wouldn't stop talking about biscuits. I didn't talk to her. Garrett, I need to talk to you about 3 transfers from my Zill business account, totaling 47. I'll do silence 4 seconds like that, then a sound not quite laughter, more like a snort. The kind of exhale you get when someone asks you a question you think is beneath you. Yeah. Listen, Chelsea, we needed this. Paige didn't want to ask because she knew you'd make a big deal out of it. We're behind on some bills, some mortgage stuff. We'll pay them. When do I have to pay? When will I finish this deal I'm working on? A few months at most. You accessed my trading account without my knowledge and transferred $47,000. This isn't a loan, Garrett, this is theft. His voice changed. His charisma dried up like water on gravel. Theft. Come on, don't believe it. We needed it more than you did. You have your farm, your horses, your little shop. We have 2 children and a mortgage we can't afford. So, yes, we needed it more than you did. And honestly, Chelsea, you owe it to your sister. I watched you play the princess of the farm for years while we struggled to survive. We needed it more than you did. I let the words echo in my chest for a moment. Not because they hurt you. Yes, but because they did something obvious. This wasn't a man who felt guilty about taking her. This was a man who felt worthy of her. I hung up. My hands were trembling not with fear, but with a stark, unwavering realization that no amount of talking would resolve this. Monday morning, my phone rang before I'd even finished feeding the horses. It was my mother. Chelsea. Honey, Paige called. I know you're upset, but they're having a really tough time. Garrett's been under a lot of pressure at work. I know how it is for young families. Mom, he stole a $47,000 from my business account. He borrowed it. There's a difference. And honestly, I've stopped. I could hear her picking out the words she thought would end the conversation. Family doesn't count, Chelsea. Family doesn't count. I've heard different versions of that rule my whole life. When I paid for Paige's car repairs, when I paid my mom's dentist bill, when I lent Garrett $3,000, he never paid it back. The result was always the same. Chelsea gave and everyone else took, and the problem is with everyone who notices this pattern. Mom, the $47,000 isn't a result, it's my salary. It's the cost of my feed. It's the vet bill for 4 horses due next week. If I don't get this money back, I'll start losing the animals. Can't you get a loan or use your savings? My savings are what built this farm. My operating account is working. He's withdrawn all the money from the operating account. Leave him alone, Chelsea. I don't want this to destroy our family. I looked out of the office window. 22 horses in the pasture. Miguel is hauling bales of hay out of the barn. The farm shop is still decorated with remnants of the reunion party that I haven't taken down. Everything is running on $3,000 and whatever I've managed to collect from product sales this week. Letting her go meant giving up the farm. And the farm was the one thing in my life that had never lied to me. "I'll manage, Mum," I said. And I meant it, but not in the way she hoped. I sat in my office, watching my horses graze, knowing I might only have 3 weeks before surgery. 3 weeks before, I had to decide which animals to send away. Has anyone ever taken what you built and told you your job was to let them in? If this story resonated with you, keep reading. What happened next? I wasn't expecting it either. On Monday afternoon, I drove to the bank. The branch manager, a woman named Diane, who had been managing the farm's account since I opened it, opened the transaction log on her screen and turned it around so I could see it. 3 active data transfers from the device. Chelsea's iPad's IP address matches my farm's Wi-Fi network. Timestamp 222 to 31 p.m. This is the time period I was inside the barn, wrapping the Duchess's falcon. Diane said, "The system shows that these operations were initiated from your registered device on your network. From our end, they are read as authorized. Someone else used my tablet while I was in the barn. I have a witness who can confirm my location." Diane crossed her arms. "Ms. Acton, I believe you, but without a police report confirming unauthorized access, the bank is treating this as a private matter for the account holder. We cannot cancel completed transfers under these circumstances." I sat with her for a while. The system told me that since the thief used my device, the problem was on me. Then I said I needed a police report. Diane nodded. I advised her to do so. I drove back to the farm and called Ruth Calloway. Ruth was 50, 5 years old and an accountant, who had been handling the farm's taxes for 6 years. She was also the most organized person I've ever met, the kind who colors their shopping list. "Ruth, I need your help finding some transfers, and I need them fast." Ruth came to the farm Tuesday evening with her laptop and a box full of printed bank details I'd sent her that morning. We sat at my kitchen table and she showed me what she'd found. The 3 quick transfers ended up in 2 accounts. 2 of them, for $18,000 and $14,000, went to an account in the name of Garrett Hollis. The third, for $15,000, went to a joint account in the names of Garrett and Paige Hollis. From Garrett's personal account, Ruth traced 2 outgoing transfers in the following days. The $18,000 went to an entity called Hollis Real Estate Group, LLC. I checked the records of the government-owned companies. The limited liability company had been dissolved 6 months earlier. Whatever business Garrett had been trying to run was now dead. The second transfer, for $14,000, had gone to an online platform owned by Ruth, a sports betting site. I felt nauseous, but I kept my cool. Ruth watched me go through the calculations, waiting for the data to settle before making her decision. As for the $15,000 in the joint account, I requested a cash withdrawal, using a debit card with a 48-hour withdrawal limit. In 4 separate transactions of $3,750 each, just under the daily limit of $4,000. Cash, no ATM. Perhaps it was to pay off someone who didn't accept electronic payments, bookmakers, creditors, or people Garrett owed money to in the real world. "Chelsea, this isn't a loan." Ruth said the money was transferred, divided, and partially distributed over 2 days. "This is concealment. The prosecutor will classify it as theft." I asked her what I needed. She said, "Everything you showed me, plus a written statement, plus the bank machine record proving you weren't the one who initiated the transfers." I was in the barn. Miguel looked at me. Ruth nodded. "So we had a missing persons report and a lead. Document everything. Feelings wouldn't last, numbers would." Friday morning, I drove to the sheriff's office and asked to see Deputy Sheriff Earl Beckett. Earl was in his 50s, large, and had a calm way of listening that made you feel heard without being rushed. I knew him from the equine therapy program. His son, a former Marine, was one of the program's early participants. We sat in a small interview room, and I explained everything to him: bank statements, transaction records showing transfers from my farm shop's tablet during the 8 minutes I spent in the stable, and Ruth's criminal summary showing the money being traced back to a closed LLC and a gambling website. Miguel's handwritten statement confirming that I had dealt with an emergency involving horses during the time frame allotted for their transport. Beckett flipped through each page, making small marks with a pencil. When he finished, he leaned back. "Madam, you've done half of my work." He paused and looked directly at me. "Are you sure you want to continue with this? He's your brother-in-law." He embezzled $47,000 from the account meant to feed 22 rescued horses. He used it to gamble. If I don't get it back, these animals will lose their homes. So, yes, Deputy Sheriff, I'm sure. He filed the report, assigned a case number, and explained the procedure. The sheriff's office will handle the investigation. The district attorney will review the evidence and decide on charges. It might take a few weeks. I thanked her and headed home. On my way, I passed the Page neighborhood. Garrett's silver Tahoe was parked in the driveway. The same Tahoe I'd paid $3,000 to fix. Lily's pink bicycle was lying on its side in the front yard. Mason's tricycle was next to it. They were my niece and nephew. Their father was the man the police had just reported. I kept driving. The following Tuesday, Page's truck stopped suddenly on my dirt road without warning. Lily and Mason got out before the engine stalled. Auntie Chelsea, can we drive Biscuit? I let Miguel drive them into the circular barn while Paige and I stayed inside the farm shop. She looked younger than I remembered. Dark circles under her eyes and bitten fingernails. Chelsea, I know what Garrett did was wrong. It started with his veiled confession. But you filed a police report against the family. He robbed me, Paige. He was desperate. You don't understand what it was like. The bills. The debt collectors who come for dinner. The mortgage company that sends letters. He didn't want to ask you because her voice was trembling. Because he's so proud and stupid. I waited. There's a technique I use with scared horses. Stand still, breathe slowly, and let her come to you. I used it on my sister. Then she said this. You have your horses. We have nothing. I looked at her. Then I looked out of the farm shop window at the barn I had rebuilt with my own hands. In the pasture, I had woven offensive sticks, which I use for 22 animals who depend on me for food and shelter, and for a patience no one has ever shown them before. Nothing. I mentioned them all, and still nothing. She called me 8 years ago, at 5 in the morning, her fingers broken, her credit lines and the money she'd earmarked for the county fair strip gone. Nothing. Because it wasn't a house in a neighborhood with a double garage, and because it smelled of hay instead of air freshener. I had nothing either, Paige. 8 years ago, a barn with holes in the roof and 5 horses no one wanted. I didn't steal from anyone I built. She took her children and left without saying goodbye. 3 weeks after the theft, my operating balance was less than $1,000. I had to deliver animal feed, worth $6,200, enough hay and grain to feed 22 horses until July. I called my supplier, a man named Dale, who had been sending me feed since my sophomore year of college. Dell, I need to defer my payment for 2 weeks. I have a difficult situation. Silence. Then Chelsea said, You're never late. Never. 2 weeks is a good amount of time. My relief lasted only about an hour before I opened my email and saw the vet bill, the $2,800 for routine health checks for 4 horses. Then came the paycheck. Miguel's pay for the 2 weeks was $2,400. I went to the farm shop and got everything 20% off. Leather bags, candle sets, and honey jars, worth $3,100 in a single week, were sold to occasional customers and a church group that came for a tour of the stables. This covered Miguel's expenses and part of the vet bill. The equine therapy sessions were the most difficult, and I had to postpone Thursday's session. 4 veterans made the 40-minute round trip to work with my horses. I called the program coordinator and told him there was a scheduling conflict. I didn't say I couldn't afford liability insurance that week. That Thursday, I walked down the barn corridor at dusk to check the water buckets. Juniper, my one-eyed puppy, was standing by the barn door, nuzzling my shoulder with her nose, as she always does when the barns are quiet. 47,000. Garrett called it essential. My mother called it a family business. Paige didn't consider my ranch horses or herself to be anything, but 147,000 would have covered about 8 months' worth of food, roughly a year's salary for Miguel, and 3 years' worth of treatment. It wasn't family money, it was the lifeline for my surgery. I found it in a gambling account and an ATM withdrawal record. The jacket appeared in the first week of July. I was cleaning out the storage room behind the farm shop, selling off old equipment and supplies I no longer needed, and collecting every dollar I could when I found a denim jacket hanging on a nail near the door frame. I left it on the day of the reunion. I almost threw it in with the pile of gifts. Then I looked in its pockets, as one does before giving a jacket. In the left pocket was a crumpled handkerchief and a hair tie. In the right pocket was a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it. It was printed on plain paper, wrinkled from being folded and carried so much. A screenshot of my bank app, my business account. Balance E50-84723. The timestamp on the screenshot is 10:00 p.m. on June 15, 6 minutes before my first phone transfer. In the bottom margin, Paige's handwriting. I recognized her handwriting as well as I recognized her voice. A short, powerful message. Enough. Yes, Jay says. I stood in the toolbox holding that piece of paper, and I felt the final barrier between what I suspected and what I knew collapse. Paige had not only known about the theft, but had investigated it. She checked my balance on the tablet, confirmed that the amount was worth stealing, printed the screenshot as evidence, and contacted Garrett. Garrett agreed before the transfers could be made. He wasn't acting alone while Paige looked elsewhere. It was a coordinated plan. My sister, whom I'd kept close all my life, walked into my farm shop, saw the amount of money in my account, and gave her husband the go-ahead to withdraw it. I carefully folded the letter, put it in a plastic bag, and drove to Ruth's office. Ruth read the message twice, then looked at me. That changed everything. It wasn't just unauthorized access anymore, it was a conspiracy. I drove home, put the plastic bag in the evidence file, and added another one. The file grew bigger every day. Ruth called me the following week and told me everything. She'd tracked every single transaction from Garrett's personal account over the past 6 months. The situation was alarming. Monthly deposits from his salary, the $2,600 after taxes, were followed by transfers to 3 online betting platforms: poker, sports, and daily fantasy games. The amounts gradually increased, the $200 here, $500 there, then 1,000 transfers in the weeks leading up to the reunion. By June, Garrett was drowning in debt. Hollis Realty, a closed limited liability company, was his attempt to sell a mortgaged duplex in Westboro. He bought it with borrowed money, invested an additional $15,000 in renovations he couldn't complete, and then withdrew when the contractor threatened to sell the property. The company's dissolution was merely a formality to cover up the failure. Ruth said, "He didn't need your money for his children, he needed it for his addiction." He justified it to himself by saying he owned property, when in fact gambling was the primary driver. I sat with the $47,000 that Zell had sent me from the horse rescue project, and the money was split between a gambling site and lotteries that probably went to the bookmakers that Garrett owed. I asked, did Paige know about the gambling? It's hard to say for sure based on the financial situation alone, but she knew about the theft. That letter proves it. I thought of Lily and Mason, and Paige standing in my farm shop saying they had nothing, and Garrett betting my food money on football matches. Then I thought of something else. If no one in the family saw the truth, Garrett would do it again. For my mother, for my Aunt Harriet, for anyone you can reach. I picked up the phone and called Deputy Beckett. "Deputy Prosecutor, any news?" "The case is strong, Miss Acton. The lawyer is reviewing it. A decision should be made this month. My mother's birthday is on the 23rd of August. The whole family will be there. Holiday, I understand. My mom called in early August. Her birthday was in 3 weeks, and she wanted everyone there. No need for trouble, Chelsea. I'm serious. You and Paige need to sort this out before my party." "Mom, this isn't something Paige and I can sort out over a cup of coffee. There's a police report, and the prosecutor is investigating." "A prosecutor? Chelsea, you're going to put your brother-in-law in jail. He stole $47,000 and gambled it away, Mom." There was silence on the line. I could hear the TV in her living room. A game show. A faint clap of applause. "What did you say?" "Gambling, online betting. That's what the money went on. Not to pay the bills, not to pay the mortgage." Mom had never heard of it. Garrett told her, and Paige confirmed it was for the mortgage payment and the children's medical bills. Just the usual appeasement. He'd taken a risk. Her voice was faint. Ruth had found him. The bank records confirmed it. $18,000 for a sports betting platform, $14,000 for a property investment that had already closed, and $15,000 withdrawn from ATMs, most likely to pay off debts she owed. My mother didn't say a word for a long time. And when she did speak, it was the voice I remembered from my childhood, the voice she used when something was completely broken. "I didn't know that. I know you didn't come. Another break. Will you come to my birthday? I could have refused. I could have said I needed some privacy. But there were 22 options, depending on my ability to face the situation bravely, and every door I tried to open. The phone call, my mother, my sister, was slammed in my face. Christmas was the last one. I'd be there, Mom, I wouldn't miss it. 2 weeks before Mom's birthday, I sat down at my desk and created the file. Not a metaphorical file, but a physical, page 1, indexed and categorized. Tab 1, bank transaction records, timestamped. Tab 2, the bank machine log, showing outgoing transfers from the farm shop's tablet computer. File 30, a signed affidavit from Miguel stating that I was at the barn caring for the Duchess during the specified transfer period. File 40, a summary of Ruth's criminal accounting, which traced the funds from my account through Garrett's accounts to the gambling platform. Dead Limited, and ATM withdrawals. File 5, page 1, a handwritten note is sufficient. Steve agreed to place the evidence in a plastic container. Headset number 6. A copy of the police report with the case number. Each allegation is supported by a document. Each document is supported by a number. Each number refers to the same person. Ruth visited the farm to review the file. You can only let the prosecutor handle it, she said. Let the legal system take its course. You don't have to tell the family. Garrett has told everyone I'm exaggerating. Mum thinks it's a family loan. Aunt Harriet thinks we're having a sibling feud. If I don't tell them the truth, his version of events will become part of the family history, and he'll repeat it with Mum, with Harriet, and with anyone else he can reach later. Ruth nodded slowly. Then explained the situation. No shouting, no making accusations without proof. I learned that from you. I paused and looked out the window at the pasture. Some of my horses don't respond to shouting, they respond to gentle hands. I closed the file, put it in my bag, and hung the bag on the hook by the front door. 14 days. What happened at my mother's birthday party changed everything. It was August 23rd, my mother's birthday. At her small cottage on Maple Street, the same house Paige and I grew up in. She hung lights in the backyard and set up a long table under the oak tree. Paper plates, plastic cups, and a fridge full of sweetened tea and beer. The guest list included the entire family, my mom, me, Paige, Garrett, Lily, and Mason, Aunt Harriet and Uncle Tom, cousins Karen and Dean, and some of my mom's neighbors. About 15 people in total. I arrived at 5:00 p.m. with my bag over my shoulder and a gift in my hand, a picture frame I'd made from reclaimed barn wood, containing a photo of my mom and dad from their 30th wedding anniversary. She cried when I opened it. Oh, Chelsea, how lovely! I hugged her and said happy birthday, trying not to think about what was in my bag. Garrett was standing there by the grill with Uncle Tom, a beer in his hand, talking about something. Maybe football. As I walked out to the backyard, he looked up and beckoned. If we were okay, if he hadn't withdrawn $47,000 from my trading account and spent it on sports betting. Paige was sitting at the kids' table cutting sausages for Mason. She saw me and looked away. Dinner was outwardly pleasant. Ribs, roast corn, potato salad, and mom salad. People were eating, laughing, and sharing stories about Dad. Uncle Tom got everyone excited with a story about Dad trying to fix the lawnmower and his shoe catching fire. It seemed perfectly normal to me. Then Aunt Harriet turned to me, eating her corn, and said, "So, Chelsea, how's the farm doing? Paige mentioned you're having some financial difficulties." I put down my fork and glanced across the table at Paige. She was staring intently at her plate. I picked up my bag. "Actually, Aunt Harriet, I'm glad you mentioned it." I stood up, not in an over-the-top way, but the way one stands when they have something to say and want to be heard clearly. I opened my bag and took out the file. I want to talk about something that some of you may have misunderstood. I don't have a financial problem. My money was stolen. Garrett left the beer in my hand. On June 15th, during a family reunion at my farm, 3 unauthorized withdrawals were made from my business account via Zelle. So 18,000 to 15,000 to 14,000. The total is 47,000. I took out the first page of the file, pulled out a copy of the bank statement showing the withdrawals, and gave it to Aunt Harriet. She was the one who asked. She had a right to see the answer. The messages were transmitted from my tablet in the farm shop during the 8 minutes. I was in the stable tending to a horse that had kicked the stable door. My brother-in-law Miguel, provided a signed statement confirming my exact location during those moments. I remained silent, my voice almost failing me. His explanation of the veterinary report was clinical, realistic, and without any exaggeration. Garrett suddenly stood up from the table. "Chelsea, what the hell are you doing? It's your mother's birthday." I looked at him as if I were looking at a horse about to bolt. Calm eyes, no sudden movements. "Do you know what day it is, Garrett? Do you know what June 15th is?" I let him wait a moment. That day, I opened the bank app on my farm shop tablet and transferred 47 Zallos into your personal accounts. Things calmed down at the farm. Even the grasshoppers stopped crawling. Garrett recovered quickly. He had 2 months to train. "This is ridiculous. I borrowed the money to cover our bills. I told Chelsea I'd pay it back. This turns a family matter into a federal case." I pulled the next page from the file and handed it to Uncle Tom, who was sitting next to me. "This is a criminal accounting summary prepared by Ruth Calloway, a certified public accountant. She traces the money after it leaves my account." I showed it to Garrett on the other side of the table. The 18,000 went to Hollis Realty Group, a limited liability company that had been dissolved 6 months before the transfer and is now a closed corporation. Garrett's jaw tightened. The 14,000 had gone to an online sports betting platform. The atmosphere had changed. I could feel it, like you feel the weather change before it rains. Uncle Tom looked up from his newspaper. Karen covered her mouth. Garrett's hands fell to their sides. I turned to Paige. "The 15,000 had been deposited into your joint account and withdrawn as cash from an ATM within 48 hours. Paige's voice sounded muffled. I didn't know where it came from. I reached for the file and pulled off the plastic sleeve. I held it up for everyone on the table to see. "This is your handwritten page. I found it in my jacket pocket. I left it at my farm after the reunion. It's legible enough. C says yes. 6 minutes before the first transfer with a timestamp." Paige's face went pale, losing all color. "Oh my God," Uncle Tom said. Aunt Harriet put down her fork. Dean leaned forward. Garrett stood up. His fists were clenched at his sides, his knuckles pale around his shins. Garrett looked around the table as if searching for a door. "You little idiot!" He caught himself, straightened up, tried to cast the spell again, and then turned to Uncle Tom and Aunt Harriet with open arms. "Listen, everyone, Chelsea's overreacting. It was a family loan. She's upset, and I understand. But this trap on her mother's birthday? That's what we're doing now." No one answered. He turned to me. The magic was gone. In its place was the real Garrett, the one I'd just heard on the phone. "Do you think you're better than us? With your farm, your horses, and your arrogance. You've always looked down on me and Paige. This whole family worships St. Chelsea, while we can't even afford electricity." I sat there, my file open, my hands on the table. "I'm not going to apologize, Garrett. I told my family what had happened to the documents, because documents have no say." He slammed his hand on the table. Plates flew. Cutlery rattled. Lily, who was sitting at the children's table 3 meters away, started to cry. "You're trying to destroy this family?" His voice trailed off on the last word. It wasn't out of anger, but the sound of a man who knew things weren't going his way, that all he had left was to raise his voice. "For money." I looked at him. Over 47,000 on hay vet bills and my only employee's salary. Money I put on a sports betting site. He opened his mouth and closed it. He didn't know I'd find out about the betting. He assumed the money was buried deep. But numbers don't get buried. They surface. That's what they do. Paige stood up, tears welling in her eyes, her hands trembling. "Stop, both of you stop." She turned to me. "I didn't want this to happen. I told her not to take all of it. I told her." She froze, listening to my words, realizing she had just admitted to the whole family that she knew the amount, and that she had been trying to negotiate it, not stop it. I kept my tone calm, not harsh, just clear. "How much did you agree to take, Paige?" She stared at me. "I figured maybe 10,000 just to pay off the mortgage, just so I could keep the house." "I didn't know about the gambling. Chelsea, I swear I didn't know about the gambling." I looked at my sister. "Really?" I saw the dark circles under her eyes. Her bitten nails, the way she was standing like she was waiting to be hit. I saw a woman trapped, with no income of her own, with 2 young children, and a man who lied about the fate of the money. I also saw the woman who checked my bank balance on my tablet, wrote down the required amount, and then handed me the keys to the safe. Both things were true at the same time. I said, "I don't think you were aware of the gambling. But you checked my balance. You confirmed the amount. I saw him approaching my cage, and you didn't say anything." I was scared, Chelsea. What if we lost our home, Lily's school district, everything? I understand your fear. I've been scared for 8 years. Every time I get a vet bill I can't pay. Every time feed prices go up. Every time a horse needs emergency surgery. But I never stole from you. Paige sat down slowly, as if her legs had given way beneath her. "Girl, please," whispered my mother, who was sitting at the head of the table. "I'm almost done." "Mom." I looked up at her. I pulled the last document from the file and held it up for everyone to see. The county sheriff. This was a copy of the police report I filed. The case number is on file at the sheriff's office. The prosecutor is reviewing the formal charges: theft by unauthorized access to a computer. In Virginia, this amount could be considered a felony. The term felony hit the table like a stone thrown into still water. Garrett's face went pale, very pale, not pale and angry, not pale and dejected, but ashen, gray like a man who just heard a word that changed his life. "You called the police." His voice was barely audible as he called out to his family. "You stole a $47,000 from my trading account and gambled it all away. This isn't a family matter, Garrett, it's a crime. I'll pay back every penny. I swear. Just stop it. Tell them you made a mistake." I folded my hands over the file. "I don't make mistakes with numbers, Garrett, you know that." Aunt Harriet leaned forward. "Chelsea, is there any way we can resolve this without—" I looked at her, not angrily, but warily. "Aunt Harriet, I've tried." I called her. She told me they need him more than I do. I went to my mother. She told me that the family didn't keep count. I went to Paige. She told me that my horses were with me and that they own nothing. I looked around the table, at every face, at every eye. I tell you this because every other door was closed to me. This was the only one left. No one spoke. The birthday cake stood in the center of the table. It was covered with blue frosting that read, "Happy Birthday, Linda 58. It wasn't cut. Garrett tried another solution. His last resort, the one he always turned to when logic failed him. He turned to his mother, Linda. He called her by her first name, something he had never done before. He had always called her Mum, but not tonight. Tonight, he needed her as an ally, not as a mother. "Are you really going to sit here and let him do this on your birthday? He's destroying this family for money." My mother looked between him and me. I saw the anger in her eyes. A woman who wants peace facing a woman who's just heard the word, gambling. Gareth insisted. "She has more money than all of us combined. The farm, the store, the horses. The $47,000 means nothing to him. And he won't miss it either." I didn't raise my voice. "It means nothing to the 22 horses that depend on me for their food. It means nothing to Miguel, who depends on me for his salary. It means nothing to the veterans who drive 40 minutes to my farm for treatment because no one else offers it for free." The room shook. I sensed a wave coming. Aunt Harriet nodded once, a slight but firm nod. Uncle Tom stretched out his arms and then clasped them again, even tighter. My cousin Deanne looked at Garrett as one looks at someone who has made up their mind. Garrett felt it too. His eyes darted around the table. He found no support, no ally, no point of support. He turned to me, his voice lowered. "You'll regret this. I promise you, you will." I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, placed it on the table, and opened the screen. "I want everyone to pay attention to what I just said," Dean said. That sounded like a threat. "Garrett." I wasn't. 3 loud knocks on the front door interrupted him. My mother got up. Her chair scraped against the porch. She walked through the kitchen to the front door and opened it. Deputy Sheriff Earl Beckett was standing on the porch in full uniform, his police badge gleaming in the porch light. His partner stood a step behind him. "Good morning, ma'am. Excuse me for interrupting. I'm looking for Garrett Hollis." My mother tightened her grip on the door frame. "What's wrong?" "Mom, may we come in?" I took a step back. Beckett walked through the kitchen and out the back door onto the porch. His eyes darted over the table, the plates, the cake, the open file in front of me, then settled on Garrett, who was standing at the back. "Mr. Hollis, I have a warrant for your arrest. Laracini for unauthorized access to a computer in connection with the theft of $47,000 from the Acton Ridge Rescue operating account on June 15. The words were formal, measured, with the same measured rhythm as any official arrest statement. But in this square, under these festive lights on the Christmas table, it felt like something was falling from a great height. Garrett looked at me. I really did. I didn't look away. I told you on the phone, Garrett, that what I did wasn't a quote. Beckett read Miranda's handwriting. Professionally, without rushing. Garrett's hands were behind her back. The cuffs creaked. Paige screamed. Wordless, just a sound. She grabbed Mason and pulled Lily to her. No, Chelsea, please stop this. The children. Think of the children. I looked at my sister, my niece crying under her mother's shirt, my nephew's wide, bewildered eyes. I hadn't even started this page. Yes, I did. I'm going to end this. My mother stood in the kitchen doorway, tears streaming down her face, her hands trembling behind the window. She looked at me with a look I'd never seen in her before. It wasn't anger, or disappointment, or sadness. I didn't want to lose any of you. You didn't lose me, Mom. You lost a 47,000 of my livelihood because you told me the family was irresponsible. I heard my voice, and it was faint. You're right, Mother. Family doesn't count, but Virginia does. Beckett drove Garrett through the house. The front door closed behind them. The table was half empty, and the plates left on it were littered with leftovers. Uncle Tom's beer was starting to go bad from the heat. The birthday cake, inscribed with, Happy 58th Birthday, Linda, and covered in blue frosting, stood untouched in the center, a silent witness to something that had once been perfect. Aunt Harriet moved first. She pulled her chair beside me and placed her hand on my arm. You did the right thing, dear. I know you don't feel it now, but you did it. Uncle Tom leaned back in his chair. If she had taken it from my shop, I would have done worse than just report her to the police. My cousin Karen asked me how long the gambling had been going on. I told her what Ruth had found out at least 2 years, based on the financial records. Dean nodded, and Paige knew. I paused and thought about what to say. She knew enough. We sat in silence for a while, the silence that follows something breaking, everyone still clinging to its remnants. Then I got up and went to my mother. She was sitting alone at the head of the table, her hands in her lap, looking at the cake. I sat beside her, without touching her, without reaching out my hand. Mother, I didn't want this to happen on your birthday, but I didn't choose this time. You asked me to fix it before your party and I did. She looked at me with teary eyes. Was it all worth it? $47,000 for food, vet bills, and my only employee's salary. Yes, it was all worth it. Those horses can't file police reports themselves. She didn't answer. I picked up my purse, kissed her on the forehead, and said, Happy birthday, Mom. I drove back to the farm in the dark. Juniper stood by the fence as my headlights swept across the pasture, waiting as usual. 6 weeks after my mother's birthday, the case was settled. Garrett's lawyer negotiated a plea deal with the prosecutor. The original charge of felony theft with unauthorized access to a computer was reduced to a lesser misdemeanor in exchange for his guilty plea, full repayment, 200 hours of community service, and 2 years of probation. As part of his probation, Garrett underwent gambling addiction treatment. The court ordered him to pay restitution. A portion of Garrett's salary was deducted. I received $47,000 over 3 years, approximately first $300 per month. The payment wasn't immediate, but it was enforceable. Paige wasn't charged. The prosecutor determined she wasn't the person who accessed the account. Garrett's fingerprints were on the transfer papers, not hers, but the handwritten note was filed with the court. Her name was on the record, and it would remain there forever. In September, Paige filed for legal separation and moved back into her mother's house with Lily and Mason. Garrett rented a studio apartment across town. For the farm, I made it through the toughest months with a small emergency loan from the Agricultural Credit Union. Ruth signed a letter of recommendation describing the circumstances. Dale, the animal feed supplier, extended the loan through July without complaint. Miguel didn't miss a single day of work. He told me so once, while we were demolishing the barns. Mrs. Zacton, my former boss, forgot to pay me 3 times and blamed the bank. I never forget that. The equine therapy program resumed in September. Travis, the son of Sheriff Beckett's deputy, returned after his first session. He brought along a friend, another Marine, who had just finished his therapy. They spent an hour with Juniper in the ring cage. As I left, Travis shook my hand and said, "She still has the magic." He meant the horse, but I think he meant me too. My mother called in October, for the first time in 6 weeks. "Can I visit the farm?" she asked. "You're always welcome, Mom," I replied. She arrived in her car one Saturday morning. I watched her drive around the farm, as if she were walking slowly in line at the cafeteria, taking stock of everything that needed fixing. She stood by the pasture fence, watching the horses for a long time. Then she sat with me on the veranda, and we drank iced tea in the October sun. "I should have listened to you," she said. "You should have listened to the numbers. I didn't know about the gambling. I know you didn't know either. But you knew they were in financial trouble, and yet you asked me to fix it. You've been asking me to fix it ever since I was 16, and I've been working 2 summer jobs so Paige can go to dance camp." I looked down at her glass. "I've asked too much of you," your father always said. He was right. We stayed like that for a while. A horse called to us from the distant pasture. Duchess, the mare who had terrified the reunion. She was all right now, healed of her fear, calm, standing on a patch of clover as if nothing had happened. "I'm sorry, Chelsea." My mother's voice was calm and clear, unreserved, unconditional. About the end result, about the pressure, about all of this. "I'm sorry, Mom. I meant it. Forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting, nor is it the same as going back to the past. It's simply the decision that holding on to anger is more valuable than writing it down. But I've drawn a line. My money's mine, my farm's my business. If you, Paige, or anyone else, need help, come to me and ask. You don't need to, and I decide." She nodded. Smart. "Fine." I poured her another cup of tea. November. Paige brought Lily and Mason to the farm for the first time since the Christmas party. I heard the small car on the gravel before I saw it. The children had gotten out of the car before Paige turned off the engine, and they ran towards the stable in their boots, calling my name. "Auntie Chelsea, is the biscuit ready? Can we go for a spin? Mason will try it himself." I let Miguel help me saddle them, while Paige stood by the fence watching. She didn't enter the enclosure, nor did she cross the fence as if she needed permission to be on the ground. She walked freely. An hour later, I went to her. She was leaning against the top rail, her arms crossed, watching Lily Juniper's hair pass through her with an almost adoring focus. "I'm sorry," Paige said, and that remained between us. Small, overused, inadequate, it was all there. "I know. Will things ever be the same between us again?" I saw Lily whisper something to Juniper. The horse lowered its head, and the girl rested her forehead against its nose. "No," I said, "but Lily and Mason are welcome here anytime, any weekend if they like. They're my niece and nephew, that hasn't changed." "What about us? I thought about the letter enough." G says yes. It's in her own handwriting, found in her pocket. "You checked my balance and wrote, enough. You saw your husband approaching the cash register and said nothing. I need time, Paige. Maybe a lot of time." Her chin twitched, but she composed herself. "I understand." I watched him put the children into the car. Mason pressed his palm against the window and waved. I waved back and stood by the gate until the car's taillights disappeared onto the dirt road. Then I went back to the barn. Juniper was at her barn door waiting for a carrot. By spring, the farm was full again. Compensation was paid on the 1st of each month. $3,300 was deposited directly into my account. No need to contact me. Half of my emergency loan has been paid off. The Dale feed shipments arrived on time, and I started ordering more for the 2 young horses I rescued over the winter. One is a mixed breed from a ranch auction, and the other is a foal that the Department of Animal Welfare took from a barn in Harrisonburg. Now we have 24 horses. The farm shop was a huge success. I added weekend workshops, leatherwork, candle making, and honey extraction, and the local tourism board started listing Acton Ridge National Park in visitor guides. Revenue was up 20% from the previous year. The therapy program was expanded to include 2 groups per week. Travis Beckett volunteered to help out every Thursday morning. He was skilled with horses, patient, and steady. He reminded me of my father. Miguel received a raise. I hired a temporary worker, a young woman named Jess. who had just finished her university studies in equine science and wanted more practical experience than just a salary. My mother came to the farm every 2 weeks. She helped in the farm shop, sorting produce and talking to customers. She never mentioned money. She never said, "Family doesn't matter." Paige worked as a receptionist at a dentist's office, her first job in 6 years. Lily and Mason spent 2 Saturdays a month at the farm, looking after the horses and eating peanut butter sandwiches in the attic. Garrett completed his community service by collecting litter from the roadside. He lived in a small apartment, attended mandatory counseling sessions, and never contacted me. I walked along the fence every morning at dawn, as I had for 8 years. The stable roof didn't leak. Things were stable. The horses were fed. I thought being the strongest in the family meant I had to keep everyone under control. But it wasn't. To be strong means knowing when someone, burdened with worries, is trying to take from you instead of adding to them. And it means having the quiet courage to bear that burden. My farm didn't survive because I poured everything I had into it, but because I finally understood what rightfully mine was that I had to protect. And I protected it in the only way I knew how, with honest hands and fair accounting. This is my story. A family reunion, an empty bank account, and 69 days of realizing that family doesn't mean freedom. If this story reminded you of the importance of protecting your boundaries, even if someone calls you selfish for it, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Thanks for being here. Comment, hit subscribe, and see you next time.